Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World. My topic today is the real world, by which I mean the phrase that people use, my students at university used to use it all the time, when they would say, but in the real world. And what they meant was not the university. The real world was somewhere outside the university. They didn't do it with me very often because they knew it would get me upset, because I used to say, what kind of world do you think this is? You know, I'm at work. This is my place of work. I have an office here. I have a boss. I get paid. The world is as real to me as I can imagine, and there's plenty of real things here for you too. If you break the law, you're going to get in trouble. Now, if you break the university's rules, you might not get into the same kind of trouble as if you break the rules of the state. But there's still consequences, and if you break the rules of the state when you're at the university, then you suffer the same consequences as if you were at home or at work or anything else. And if you make somebody upset, if you get into a fight, and so on and so forth, those are all real. Your emotions are real. Everything's real. So what is it that makes people think that some places are real and some places are not real? Let's unpack that. Well, we can start with the world of fiction. And it's okay to say that that is in some ways not the real world. I mean, if you take science fiction, Star Wars, Star Trek, superhero stuff, Avengers, Batman, all of that. All right, there's an aspect of those stories that is clearly not real. But even just standard fiction, where you don't have special gadgets or CGI or whatever, where you're just telling a story, maybe a love story, you can still perfectly legitimately say it's not the real world, because things happen in that fictional world that can't happen in everyday life. They, for example, have endings, whereas we don't have endings in natural life, at least some endings. I mean, we do die, for example. There are people who leave your life and never return. Those things happen, but by and large, your life is not broken up into episodes like Big Bang Theory or Friends or How I Met Your Mother or whatever. And that's understood. And there's also devices, plot devices in fictions that couldn't really happen in everyday natural life, in real life. Okay, I understand that. I understand that there is the world of fiction and the real world, and that they are to a great degree distinct and discrete. But what's this about university life versus the real world? What's that about? I think that some of it has to do with the idea that the real world is the world of work, the world where you get up in the morning, get dressed, have breakfast, go out, go to the place where you work, sit in an office or factory or whatever for 8 hours or more, finish your work, come home, and then spend your evening with family or friends or what have you. That somehow or other the real world. Well, university could be like that also. I used to tell my friends, my students I should say, I used to tell them, look, if you get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, just like you're going to work, instead you have breakfast, and then you settle down to work at 9 o'clock, like maybe you have to go to a lecture or a class, but if not, go to the library. When you have to go to a class, then go back to the library. Have a break for lunch, let's say 30 minutes, even an hour if you want to be leisured about it. But then work till 5 or 6 o'clock. And then have dinner and you're done. And if you do that, you will excel at university. You will do wonderfully well because the average student attends class as much as is needed. I mean, often my students would try to goof off, although I used to have a mandatory attendance policy. But if a professor didn't have mandatory attendance, they'd often just say, oh, well, I'm not going to go today, I'll read the book or what have you. And in between classes would goof off, as well as in the evenings, and then like knuckle down to work a week before exams or the night before a paper was due or whatever, and then wonder why they weren't doing terribly well. If they had worked like they'd worked in a job from 9 to 5 consistently, Monday to Friday, they would have done exceptionally well. I mean, that's provided that when they got to the library they actually worked. They didn't just stare around them and so forth. That was the policy when I went to Oxford University. We used to get up 8 o'clock, have breakfast, go to the library or go to lectures or go to tutorials, take lunch usually around 12 o'clock for half an hour, back to the library, work until 4:30, which is tea time, have half an hour for tea time, 5 o'clock back to the library till 7 o'clock, then have dinner, and then after dinner do what you want. I used to go to folk clubs, I used to be involved in dance groups and various other activities in the evenings, played billiards in pubs, darts, what have you. And we all did quite well working. It was, 9 to 7 admittedly, with a couple of breaks, but 5 days a week, all evenings off, all weekends off. It's just like a job. So why couldn't that be the real world? Well, apart from the fact that we didn't get paid to do it, it was another real factor distinguishing work from university, which I didn't see in my own university life, but I saw it when I taught at university. What I didn't understand for a very long time was that my students didn't see the relationship between what I was teaching and their actual lives. They would come to class, read the books, maybe. Wasn't always the case, but let's just imagine like they read the reading that I assigned for the day. They attended the class where I talked about the reading and maybe told some anecdotes about it, expanded on it, and so forth. They took notes. They knew that I was going to examine them on the issues in the middle of the term or at the end of the term. So they wanted to incorporate the information. So they memorized it as best they could. But they didn't realize that it actually was talking about their actual lives. They had a compartmentalized world of academic research and the real world, so that what they were learning in class had no impact on their actual lives. I mean, I do remember once in a while, a student, you can imagine the light bulb going off. I would say something and a student would say, oh, that happened to me. Wow. But it was so rare. Most of the time when I'm talking about abstractions having to do with family and kinship and marriage, exchange, politics, and so forth, they couldn't mesh together their daily experience and the academic analysis of that data, of those experiences. So, I mean, I spent a great deal of the latter part of my lecturing career trying to pound into my students the notion that what I was lecturing about mattered. Now, obviously, you can see that there's a certain element of narcissism in there, with me saying, come on, listen to me, I'm telling you something that matters. And of course, it mattered to me, mattered a lot to me, but I wanted them to see that it could matter to them, it could have an effect on their lives. And I don't know how successful I was. I'm sure that the majority, more than 50%, never got it. They learned their lessons, memorized them, repeated them back for exams, got a B if they did well, and moved on. But one of the things I did try to do was encourage my students to take the lessons I was teaching and apply them to their own life situations. I used to have them do little fieldwork projects so they could see that the theory that I was expounding on in my classes had application in their real world. That academic is not a synonym for useless. This is a big problem in the world today, is that academic study, including scientific study, as we know, is being dismissed as it's just opinion. That's what you need to do to combat COVID-19? Well, that's your opinion. You think wearing a mask will help the spread, but I don't, and my opinion's as good as yours. Now, that's a world that is a disastrous world, a world where you divided up the academic world, which is not real, and the world you live in, which is real. If you make that distinction, then you're making a horrible mistake. All right, more on Tuesday if I don't get into cooking. Meanwhile, please like, subscribe, and I wish you a wonderful weekend.